I'll never forget the night I saw Prince Zandusa's eyes change. He was standing in the village square, surrounded by his usual entourage, smiling at the people. But when I looked at him, I saw something dark that made my stomach twist. His smile faded, and for a brief moment, his eyes turned a bright, unnatural green. That's when I knew the prince was not just a man, he was something far worse. I was born in Benape village, a quiet, simple place tucked away in the hills where the only things that mattered were the land, the people, and the old stories. It was a peaceful village, or so I thought. Prince Zandusa was the son of our chief, and though he was young, only a few years older than me, he always had a certain power about him. I remember the first time I saw him clearly. It was during the harvest festival. People were celebrating, dancing, and singing by the fires, but there he was, standing apart from the crowd, watching. He had dark skin like most of us, but his hair was different, long and straight, unlike the curly hair of the other villagers. His face was sharp, his eyes too piercing. Everyone respected him, of course, but I noticed something strange. The older villagers avoided him, casting quick glances as they whispered in hushed voices. I asked my mother about it once, but she quickly shushed me. "He is the prince, Namdi," she said, her voice low. "We must respect him. He is blessed." But there was something off about him. I couldn't shake the feeling that the prince was hiding something dangerous. I always thought something was wrong with Prince Adana. He didn't belong with the others. There was a coldness in him, something I couldn't explain. The first sign of something being wrong came a week after the festival. The villagers woke up to find their livestock slaughtered. Cows, goats, everything was dead. And it wasn't just the killing that was strange. It was the way they were killed. Their throats were slit cleanly, but their eyes were wide open, staring blankly into the night. Something didn't feel right. The village elders gathered in secret. I overheard my father talking to them, his voice tight with worry. "This isn't the work of wild animals. Something else is happening here," my father said. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw Prince Zandusa walking towards the edge of the forest, his eyes dark, his steps slow and deliberate. I couldn't stop myself. I followed him. I didn't mean to follow him, but I had to know something was wrong. The prince was walking into the forest, his footsteps heavy, his eyes fixed forward, like he was drawn to something. I watched from behind the tree as Prince Zandusa entered the heart of the forest. There, at the clearing, I saw a fire burning. Around it stood several hooded figures, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. And in the center of the circle, I saw something that made my blood run cold. An altar, and on it, a goat, its body still and lifeless. Prince Zandusa raised his arms, his eyes glowing a sickly green. The chanting grew louder, and the ground beneath me seemed to tremble. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then I heard a voice, a deep, guttural voice that seemed to come from everywhere. "The sacrifice must be made, Prince. The land demands it." Prince Zandusa nodded. The hooded figures lowered their heads in submission. I watched in horror as he reached for the knife on the altar. At that moment, a twig snapped behind me. I froze. I saw everything, the fire, the chanting, the knife, and then a noise behind me. My heart stopped. I wasn't alone. I turned and saw one of the hooded figures stepping out of the shadows. I ran faster than I ever had before, through the trees, over the rocks, not looking back. But the sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. My breath was heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't let them catch me. I stumbled through the dark forest, the branches scratching at my skin. Just as I thought it was over, the ground shook. A loud crack echoed through the forest, and a massive figure, like a shadow from the past, emerged from the trees. The figure moved with such power that the ground trembled beneath its feet. It was an ancient spirit, the one Prince Zandusa had made his deal with. The prince has not fulfilled the bargain. The voice rumbled like thunder. Prince Xandus's face twisted in rage, but I could see the fear in his eyes now. The spirit towered over him. The ground shook as the spirit rose. It towered over the prince, its voice like thunder. The prince's face twisted in fear. The spirit was angry. And I realized Zandusa had failed. When I woke up, I was back in my uncle's house, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I didn't understand what had happened. Had it all been a nightmare, or was it real? Days passed, and the villagers spoke in whispers. Prince Zanduza was never seen again. The chief, his father, said nothing. The village returned to normal, but something had changed. The forest felt different, the air was heavier, and I knew Prince Zandusa was gone, but the spirits were still watching. They always were. I never saw Prince Zandusa again. The village moved on, but I could never forget. I felt the spirits watching, and I knew there are some bargains that should never be made.